Here's a strange question for you. Why would a male beetle try to mate with a beer bottle? And why would baby birds ignore their mother to peck at a fake red stick instead? Sounds weird, right? But these behaviors actually reveal something fascinating about how our brains work. Back in the 1950s, a scientist named Nicotine made an amazing discovery. He won a Nobel Prize for this work, and what he found changed everything we thought we knew about behavior. See, he noticed something strange. Animals would consistently pick fake versions of things over real ones, but not just any fake versions. They chose the ones where certain features were pumped up, exaggerated. Let me give you an example. Take those baby birds. When researchers showed them a wooden stick painted bright red, they went crazy for it. They actually ignored their mother's beak to peck at this fake one. Why? Because it was redder, bigger, more extreme than the real thing. This discovery explains something that affects all of us. Why modern digital content, especially porn, can feel so irresistible. But here's the good news. When you understand what's really going on in your brain, changing your porn habit becomes surprisingly easy. And it stays that way. This isn't another video about willpower. It's not about shame either. It's about understanding a fascinating work of how your brain works. And trust me, once you get this, everything changes. In fact, I put together a free urge documentation that shows you exactly how to apply this understanding when urges hit. You will find the link in the description below. But first, let me show you the science behind why this approach works so well. So let's dive into how Tim made this amazing discovery. He was working at Oxford University in the 1950s, studying animal instincts. So what were his main focus? A tiny fish called the three-spine stickleback. Now these fish do something really interesting. During breeding season, the males develop bright red bellies, and they super aggressive about defending their territory from other males. They specifically react to that red color. Makes sense, right? They need to protect their nesting areas to attract mates. But here's where Tim got clever. He started wondering what exactly makes these fish attack. So he began testing different models. Some looked really realistic, others pretty basic. Then came the breakthrough. He took a wooden model, just a crude symbol shape, and painted its belly with the brightest red color he could find, way brighter than any real fish could ever be. And guess what happened? The male fish went absolutely crazy. They attacked this fake fish more aggressively than they ever attacked a real rival. That's when it hit him. The fish weren't caring about how realistic the model looked. They just reacting to that red color. And the brighter the red, the stronger their reaction, even if it was completely unnatural. Then his student, Richard Dawkins, took this idea further. Instead of studying fighting, he looked at mating behavior. He made fake female fish with super large bellies, much bigger than real females get when they're ready to mate. The male fish couldn't resist these artificial super females, and Dawkins called them sex bombs because they were just that attractive to the males. Other scientists started finding the same pattern in different species. For example, herring gill chicks pecked more at fake beaks with exaggerated response than at real ones. And ground nesting birds prefer to sit on artificial eggs that were larger and had more pronounced markings than their own. But here's my favorite example. It happened in Australia. Beetles trying to mate with beer bottles. Yes, actual beer bottles. The brown glass with its dimple surface looked like a super-sized, super attractive female beetle to them. This wasn't just a lab curiosity. It was actually threatening the beetle population in some areas. Only discoveries pointed to something fundamental about how brains work. Our neural circuits are built to respond to specific signals. But, and this is crucial, there's no upper limit to these responses. So when we encounter an artificial signal that's stronger than anything in nature, our brain doesn't just respond normally. It responds even more strongly. Think about that for a minute. Our brains have no built-in way to say, hey, this signal is too strong to be real. They just keep responding more and more intensely to stronger and stronger signals. So what do all these animal experiments tell us about ourselves? Especially about our relationship with porn. Well, this is where it gets really interesting because humans are different from every other species in a fascinating way. See, we're the only creatures on Earth who can actually create these supernormal stimuli ourselves, and we're really good at it. This isn't just some random ability we picked up. It comes from our evolution as tool makers and problem solvers. With our big, sophisticated prefrontal cortex, it doesn't just help us plan or create. It lets us engineer artificial triggers that tap right into our ancient brain circuits. Let me show you how this plays out in today's world. So you take food for example. Food scientists in labs can now figure out exactly how much salt, sugar, and fat to put in a product to make it irresistible. They literally call it the bliss point. It's not random. They deliberately target brain circuits that evolved when food were scarce. Or look at social media. Those platforms hire whole teams of psychologists and brain scientists to design features that hook us. That little like button is not just a cute feature, it's a supernormal stimulus. In nature, we might get a few subtle signs of social approval throughout our day, but social media concentrates on that approval into quick, powerful hits that our brains find super rewarding. You can see video games do the same thing. Every time you level up or win something, you get a reward that's bigger and faster than anything you experience in real world. These games trigger the same circuits that evolved to reward us for beneficial behaviors in nature. Now, when we talk about porn, this effect gets even stronger. Think about it. Our sexual response circuits evolved in an environment where finding a potential mate was pretty rare. It required actual social interaction. But with modern porn, it takes all these natural triggers and amplifies them way beyond what's possible in nature. It's not just the visual stuff, it's the variety, the instant access, the constant novelty. Our brains never evolved to handle this kind of stimulation, but here's what makes us unique. We're not just creating these supernormal stimuli, we're constantly making them more powerful. Companies track everything. What people watch, for how long, what makes them come back. They use this data to make their content even more compelling. It's like an arms race to trigger our brain's reward systems more and more effectively. Now this might sound scary, but here's why it's actually good news. When you understand that your brain is just responding to carefully engineered triggers, it takes away all the shame and confusion. Your brain isn't broken. It's not defective. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do when it encounters these enhanced signals. So think about it like this. Remember that beetle trying to mate with the beer bottle. Its brain was running its normal mating program. It just got triggered by an artificial signal. That's exactly what's happening with us and modern supernormal stimuli. The big difference is that we can understand the process. We can recognize what's happening in our brains. And that's what led us change our relationship with these artificial triggers. Okay, now we get how supernormal stimuli work. Let's look at what's actually happening inside your brain. And here's the cool part. Once you understand this, making changes becomes so much easier because it's all about working with your brain, not fighting against it. First, let me clear up something most people get wrong about dopamine. You probably heard it called the pleasure chemical. That's not quite right. Think of dopamine more like your brain's spotlight operator. It doesn't actually create pleasure. It just tells your brain what to pay attention to. It's like your brain's way of saying, hey, this is important, look at this. This system developed over thousands of years to help us survive. And when our ancestors found something valuable, like high-calorie food or potential mates, their dopamine would surge. But here's the fascinating part. Dopamine doesn't just kick in when you get the reward. It actually responds to signs that predict rewards. So let me give you an example. Picture a hunter-gatherer spotting berry bushes in the distance. So when do you think their dopamine kick in? Not when they ate the berries. It happened when they first spotted the bushes. The dopamine surge makes them more focused, more motivated, and help them remember exactly where they found those berries. So practice more system, right? And it gets even more interesting. Every time we find a reward, dopamine helps strengthen those neural pathways. It's like your brain saying, this worked, let's definitely remember how we found it. And scientists call this reward prediction learning. In nature, it's super helpful for survival. But here's where modern technology throws a wrench in the works. See, in nature, these reward cues were pretty rare. A hunter-gatherer might find those berry bushes once a week. Maybe spot a potential mate every few days. Our dopamine system was built for this natural pace. Modern porn completely changes this game. Instead of occasional natural cues that require actual social interaction, we now have instant, constant access to artificial enhanced stimuli. Every new image or videos is like a supercharged cue for your dopamine system. And get this, your brain has something called reward prediction error. When a reward is better than expected, dopamine surges even higher. That's why clicking to a new video feels so compelling. Each click might lead to something even more exciting than the last, and your brain loves that possibility of unexpected reward. But here's why this is actually good news. Your brain isn't broken, it's not misbehaving. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do when it meets these artificial super cues. Just like those stickleback fish couldn't resist that bright red signal, your brain is just following its natural programming. So what is the big difference? Unlike those fish, we can understand what's happening. We can see how our dopamine system is responding to these artificial cues that have been engineered to be stronger than anything in nature. And that's what moves us from feeling ashamed and confused to having real clarity about what's going on. So let me put this huge change in human experience into perspective for you. For most of human history, we encounter sexual stimuli in pretty natural ways. Think about it. Just 100 years ago, if someone wanted to see anything sexually provocative, they have to really work at it. Maybe find a certain painting in the museum, maybe track down a private photo collection, and even then, pretty tame stuff compared to what we see today. But here's the thing, this limited access wasn't just about society's rules. It actually much helped our brains evolve. So back in our evolutionary past, finding a mate meant going through a whole process. You had to interact with people, build relationships, usually achieve something in your community. Our reward system were built for this kind of effort and reward setup. Then the digital revolution came along and completely flipped the script. Scientists call this an evolutionary mismatch. Let me break it down into three big changes: access, variety, and intensity. First, let's talk about access. Today, anyone with a smartphone has instant private access to endless sexual content. No effort needed, no waiting, no social interaction required. It's like taking a brain that evolved to hunt and gather food and suddenly dropping it into an endless free buffet. Of course, it's going to get overwhelmed. Second, think about variety. Our ancestors might have met what maybe a dozen potential mates in their whole life. Now, someone can see more novel mates in one browsing session and then the ancestors saw in 1,000 lifetimes. Our brains evolved to really notice new potential mates because they were rare and valuable. But now, we flood in these circuits with endless novelty. Third, there's intensity. Modern digital content isn't just easier to find, it is engineered to be more stimulating than anything in nature. Remember those sex bombs in Dawkins' fishing experiments? Same thing here. High definition video, perfect lighting, ideal camera angles. It's all designed to be super stimulating. Our brains never evolved to handle this kind of enhanced content. But wait, it gets even more interesting. These three factors, access, variety, and intensity, they are being constantly tweaked and optimized. Content platform track everything, what people watch, how long they watch it, and what makes them come back for more. It's like having millions of scientists running experiments 24/7 to make content more and more compelling. This is exactly why advice like just use willpower or show some self-control or use blocker apps completely misses the point. You're not dealing with some natural temptation here. You're facing carefully engineered super stimuli that bypass your brain's normal satisfaction switches. But here's why understanding this actually freeing. Your brain is responding normally to abnormal stimuli. This isn't about you being weak or broken. Your brain is doing exactly what it should when it encounters these enhanced signals. Think about it this way. If you took the most disciplined person from 1923 and dropped them into today's digital world, they struggle just like everyone else. It's not about personal weakness or bad character or some evil folks like people out there try to dramatize about porn. It's about understanding what happens when ancient brain circuits meet modern technology. Now we get to the really good part. This understanding changes everything when you realize your brain is just doing what it was designed to do with these supernormal stimuli. Something amazing happens. And that's when real change becomes possible. Listen, I want you to really listen to me this. You're not broken. And you're not morally deficient. And you definitely don't lack willpower. Your brain is simply following a program that's been built into it to seek out rewards and avoid discomfort. Remember those baby birds picking at the big red stick instead of their mother's pick. It's completely natural. Let me show you why this understanding is so powerful. Most people handle their porn viewing habits in one of two ways. Either they shame themselves, thinking they somehow morally failing, or they try to white knuckle it through pure willpower. Both approaches actually make things harder, not easier. So let's talk about shame first. It's actually working against you at a biological level. When you feel ashamed, your brain pumps out stress hormones like cortisol. And guess what these stress hormones do? They make your reward circuits even more sensitive to relief. So the more you shame yourself, the more your brain craves comfort. And often through the exact behavior you're trying to change. So I'm talking about the catch-22. And willpower, that's like trying to hold your breath forever. Sure, you might last for a while, but eventually those biological drives will win out. You cannot willpower your way out of breathing, right? And same goes for how your brain responds to supernormal stimuli. But here's why the science is so freeing. These responses aren't character flaws. They're just predictable biological reactions to artificial triggers. Think about that fish that couldn't tell the difference between a real rival and a wooden model with a bright red bottom. There's a part of your brain, what some call the lower brain, that's wired to react fast based on instincts and survival. It cannot really tell the difference between natural sexual cues and the exaggerated versions of digital content. And this also explains why typical advice about porn often backfires. So when someone says just stop watching, they assuming your brain is making a conscious choice each time, but that's not what's happening at all. Your brain is just responding to what it sees as high-value reproductive opportunities. That's what it's been programmed to do for our survival. Here's a simple way to think about it. Try quitting sugar by just telling yourself, sugar is bad. Doesn't work, does it? Why? Because your brain's response to sugar isn't a rational choice. It's a deep survival mechanism. Same with porn. It's not a moral choice. It's your brain reacting to what it thinks are important survival and reproductive signals. The real freedom comes when you get this. Understanding these mechanisms gives you something way more powerful than willpower. It gives you insight. When you understand your brain is just following its natural programming. You can stop fighting yourself and start working with your brain instead. So let's talk about a better way. Instead of fighting your brain, let's work with it. Once you understand supernormal stimuli, you got a huge advantage. You know exactly why you feel drawn to porn, and better yet, you know how to handle it differently. This isn't just theory. It's practical stuff that makes change surprisingly easy. Remember those jewel beetles trying to mate with bee bottles. They were not choosing to make a mistake. Their brains were just responding to signals they were designed to notice. But here's our advantage over those beetles. We can understand what's happening in our brains. We don't need to feel ashamed. We don't need to fight our instincts. We can just notice. You can understand that it's just an artificial signal triggering your natural response. Now this is where mindfulness comes in, but not the way you might think. Forget about trying to empty your mind. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about something much simpler. Just observing your brain's responses with curiosity instead of judgment. When you feel an urge to watch porn, something fascinating is happening up there in your brain. Your reward circuits are picking up what they think is a high-value reproductive opportunity. Just like that beetle's brain lighting up at the shine of a beer bottle. Your brain is responding to artificial signals that look like natural triggers. Here's what makes this approach so different. Instead of trying to push these urges away or distract yourself, you can get curious about them. Each urge becomes like a little science experiment. You can say to yourself, like, interesting. My brain thinks it found something valuable right now. I can just watch this respond without having to do anything about it. And this completely changes the game. Instead of that old cycle of urge, shame, resist, relapse, you develop a new relationship with these impulses. They become more like where the patterns passing through, interesting to observe, but not something you have to act on. Think about how different this is from the usual advice. Most approaches tell you to avoid triggers, install blockers, or keep super busy. Sure, this might work for a while, but they don't solve the real issues. It's like putting a band-aid on a splinter. They're just dealing with the surface problem. My approach gets to the root cause. When you understand the supernormal stimuli mechanism, you see the urges for what they really are. Just your brain doing its job with artificial signals. This creates a natural space between feeling an urge and needing to act on it. And here's something really cool: when you stop fighting these urges and start observing them with curiosity, they often become less powerful on their own. It's like when you learn how a magic trick works, you can process it, but it doesn't fool you anymore. Now, this doesn't mean you never feel drawn to porn again. Your brain will keep detecting the subnormal stimuli. That's its job. But your response changes dramatically. Instead of feeling overwhelmed or ashamed, you can just notice, like, this my brain doing what brains do when they meet artificial stimuli. This new way of handling urges lasts way longer than trying to be constantly vigilant or avoiding triggers. You not weary yourself out fighting your brain anymore. Instead, you're getting smarter about how your brain works and learning to work with it, not against it. And to help you put this into practice, I created a free urge documentation that walks you through exactly what to do when an urge hits. It comes with a detailed video showing you how to recognize, allow, and process urges using this understanding we talk about. You will find a link in the description below. This isn't just theory. It's a practical tool that makes this whole process much easier. Here's something really cool about this approach. It naturally builds your emotional intelligence. But let me be clear about what I mean by emotional intelligence here. We're not talking about controlling your emotions or forcing yourself to feel different. We're talking about really understand how your brain processes emotions and responds to triggers. Because without that understanding, most people fall into a trap. Instead of observing their urges, they judge themselves for having them. Every time you shame yourself for having an urge or watching porn, you're strengthening the link between your natural brain responses and negative emotions. So it's like emotional quicksand. The more you struggle, the deeper you sink. But something fascinating happens when you approach these urges with understanding instead. Scientists call it metacognition, fancy word for being able to observe your own thoughts. This isn't just some philosophical idea. It's a practical skill that literally changes how your brain handles urges and emotions. Here's the thing to remember. Your brain isn't out to get you. It's doing exactly what it learned to do over thousands of years, responding to signals that seem important for survival and reproduction. The problem isn't your brain response. The problem is this artificial environment we created, full of super stimuli. This is where you start developing real emotional intelligence. Instead of seeing urges as enemies, not that, you start seeing them as interesting data points about how your brain works. It's like becoming a scientist studying your mind, but without honest judgment and criticism. Think about how different this is from the usual advice about emotional control. Most approaches tell you to fight against unwanted emotions or trying to replace them with good ones. That's like trying to hold a big ball underwater. It takes a ton of energy and eventually it's going to pop up even stronger. So my approach is totally different. When you understand how supernormal stimuli work, you develop what psychologists call emotional granularity. That means you get better at noticing the subtle differences in your emotional experiences. You start seeing the difference between a real sexual urge and your brain's automatic response to artificial triggers. This builds up emotional resilience in a whole new way. Instead of trying to become stronger at fighting urges, you become smarter about how your brain works. The urges don't go away, and here's the key: they don't need to. What changes is how you relate to them. It's like when you learn how a magic trick works. The trick might still look impressive, but it doesn't fool you anymore. You can appreciate the skill while knowing it's not real magic. Same thing here. When you understand that porn is just a supernormal stimulus triggering old brain circuits, it loses its power over you. This new way of dealing with urges and emotions, psychologists call it psychological flexibility. It means you can stay present with whatever thoughts or feelings come up without getting knocked off balance. You are not at the mercy of every urge anymore. Instead, you can observe these responses with curiosity. And here's the best part: it creates the positive feedback loop. Every time you respond to an urge with understanding instead of shame or resistance, you're building your emotional intelligence stronger. You're teaching your brain a new way of handling its own responses. And yet this skill doesn't just help with porn. It helps with any situation where you deal with supernormal stimuli or strong emotions. So let's wrap up this with what we learned. The discovery of supernormal stimuli by Tim Burton helps you understand why porn can feel so compelling. It's not because you're weak or broken. It's because your brain is responding exactly as nature designed to, when encountering exaggerated versions of natural signals. This understanding frees us from shame and points us toward a better way. Not fighting against your brain, but understanding how it works and developing a new relationship with our urges. Remember, you don't need hours of daily effort or constant vigilance. You just need to understand what's happening in your brain and approach it with curiosity rather than judgment. To help you put this into practice right away, I created a free urge documentation guide. It shows you exactly how to process urges when they arise, step by step. You find it in the description below, along with a detailed video walking you through the whole process. This is the path to sustainable change, working with your brain's natural processes rather than against them. And thank you for taking the time to understand this important concept. Understanding supernormal stimuli might seem like a small thing, but it can completely change how you approach this challenge. And that understanding, free from shame and full of curiosity, is where real lasting change begins.